Coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
These interviews with teachers who are basically saying, like, if you don't let me talk to my first grade class about gender, sexuality, and sexual preference, then I can't do my job. You really get the sense that these people, they're like gender commissars. They went into teaching in order to discuss gender with little kids. Like the whole okay groomer thing, really, I mean, they get horrified by it and they find it like so insulting, but that's really what they're doing. They really, I mean, okay, maybe they're not trying to groom 7-year-olds to be like, sex partners with them necessarily, but they are certainly interested in warping their minds. Like someone was saying, how is this going to do anything but confuse little children?
Hello, and welcome to The Roundtable, your weekly editors and publishers podcast from The American Mind. I'm your host, Spencer Clavin, features editor of The American Mind, and I am joined today, an increasingly rare occurrence, but always happy to be joined by Matthew Peterson, founder of The American Mind and president of New Founding at newfounding.com, and as often or always by managing editor Seth Barron. Lots to discuss, events rapidly accelerating. It seems they always are these days, but we got to kick it off here with Disney because this is what's all over my Twitter feed, at least. And really my Twitter feed, as we all know, is the center of the world. So no, this is Chris Rufo gets a scoop as he does when he manages just to watch basically what the vanguard of the woke revolution say out loud. And in this case, he's picked up a clip of Disney's corporate president, Carrie Burke, who talks here in this clip about the need to have a minimum of 50% of Disney's characters be LGBTQIA and racial minorities. She also mentions having, quote, 2 queer children. Let's just listen to a clip of this real quick.
I'm here as a mother of 2 queer children, actually, one transgender child and one pansexual child, and also as a leader. And that was the thing that really got me, because I have heard so much from so many of my colleagues over the course of the last couple of weeks in open forums and through emails and phone conversations. And I feel a responsibility to speak, not just for myself, but for them, to all of us. We had an open forum last week at 20th where, again, the home of really incredible, groundbreaking LGBTQIA stories over the years, where one of our execs stood up and said, we only have a handful of queer leads in our content. And I went, what? That can't be true. And I realized, it actually is true. We have many, many, many LGBTQIA characters in our stories, and yet we don't have enough leads and narratives in which gay characters just get to be characters and not have to be about gay stories. And so that's been very eye-opening for me. And I can tell you, it's something that I feel perhaps had this moment not happened, I as a leader and me as my colleagues would not have focused on. And going forward, I certainly will be more so. I know that we will be. And I hope this is a moment where, the 50% of the tears, sorry, are coming. We just don't allow each other to go backwards.
So, listen when they tell you who they are. This is all folded into the story we've been following for a while about the so-called supposedly don't say gay bill in Florida, which, as we've been stressing, is really a don't be a groomer bill, or perhaps more politely, a parents' rights bill. It makes it illegal to teach about sort of trans and gay lifestyles in kindergarten through third grade, and then mandates age-appropriate instruction for the rest of the grades. This has occasioned a real masks-off moment, I think, for people that just are desperately devoted to teaching your children, not just any children, but all children, about the most extreme and bizarre and perverse way of looking at the human person and at human sexuality. We're not just talking here about like, you know, some people have two moms. We're talking about like, here's the gender snow person, and the different way that you might reconfigure your flesh to support the catastrophic designs of your divine spark. And the sexualizing of children, which you hear in that clip, right? I have a pansexual child, she says, is really at the heart of this, which is why the bill has been such a flashpoint. There have been other movements around this issue, for example, in Texas and Idaho. You know, in Texas, it becomes it's child abuse now by executive order, I believe, to pursue sex change operations on minors. But the Florida one has really been at the center of it all, in part because of the just cojones of Ron DeSantis, who has repeatedly forced the reporters who dishonestly frame this thing to just confront what's actually going on. Again and again, he'll say, what does the bill say? And what are you actually trying to do? Meanwhile, Disney, right, major corporate player in Florida, probably the potentially most powerful corporation in Florida. They've got Walt Disney Resort, obviously, in Orlando. And they have been kind of, hedging is not the right word, but they've been in an internal struggle over this, which has been its own kind of fascinating story. I just want to read for a moment from this piece in Quillette, Disney's Institutional Capture, written pseudonymously under the name Ethan L. Clay. This is a Disney employee who describes what's going on internally, because for a while, the Disney being, an important player in Florida was kind of condemning the bill, but not really so-called quote unquote doing enough, doing the work, withdrawing its funding. I mean, the radical wing wanted just a salt the earth, fire and brimstone attack on Florida for the audacity of DeSantis. And these radicals do seem to be winning out. So here's this article. He writes, the short answer is institutional capture, a term that once belonged to economic theory as regulatory capture. In economics, this is a form of corruption that occurs when a political entity, policymaker, or regulator is co-opted to serve a particular constituency and its interests. In business institutions, the process is much the same. Only the goal is not to change a regulatory policy, but to turn the business itself into a mouthpiece for an ideology. Disney has been rotting from the inside for quite some time, but the speed with which its public transformation took place is truly breathtaking. Florida was the final straw. So this guy at least views this Florida bill as the kind of, again, it's a masks off moment. It kind of rips the whole thing open so that we start to see the people like Carrie Burke, who are, in positions of power over what will be beamed into the households of millions and millions of families across America. And this is and there was another clip that Rufo tweeted out in which it's called a not so secret gay agenda, right? You will not be able to take this out of your children's school because we will put it into their entertainment. We'll put it everywhere. I'm going to hand it over now to the guys and just say, this seems to me like an issue in which there's going to be a huge firefight, but one in which we can actually win. I mean, the power of something like Disney is incredible, but you also see in DeSantis the power of somebody simply not letting them play their game. So what do you make of it all?
Well, I mean, first, none of this happens without DeSantis, as you said, because he crafted something that made a lot of common sense in just the right way. They went crazy. They don't like it because it's a political weapon. It's the kind of thing that they do, this kind of law. I mean, it not only protects kids, but it becomes a political weapon, an issue. And, they're freaking out about it. Disney in particular is just really interesting to me. I mean, this is a company that has grown incredibly, just bought, right? Huge chunk of Fox. I mean, $50, $60 billion deal. Like, they're acquiring more. And they have grown leaps and bounds. I mean, this is a company that's done really well over the last 20 years. Just a colossus, dominating by going back to Marvel and Star Wars and whatever. And you have to sit there and think. I'm really curious about what people think could be done to them, because how many people are really going to get off Disney Plus? Will that even matter? Will they actually run out of steam? I don't know. I think a lot of people, they compartmentalize these things in their mind, and they haven't thought about stop watching content from people who hate me. And when the Obi-Wan show comes out, there's a lot of people who love Star Wars and are going to watch it regardless of their their religious or political or cultural beliefs. So the kind of question is, what would really hurt them? And one thing that I do think is hilarious, as I said on Twitter, was I really would love for China to just ban all their content, which of course is a huge source of revenue for Disney and all of Hollywood. It's I don't even know what it is now, but they already reached the 50% point a few years ago, where half the money is coming from overseas, and that's predominantly China. And China is the largest market in the world for movies. And you have to think, if they just cut that off, what would Disney do? I'd love to watch them squirm and see what becomes of it. And I mean, you have a very interesting story also within Disney too. Will the kind of activists make more and more demands? I think they will. I think they are. That's what's going on now. The CEO is probably going to have to step down, or at least that's not inconceivable as part of this. There's an article kind of attacking him, but it was a straight article. I'm trying to, straight piece of journalism, just kind of saying like, look, this guy is kind of lost his position. There's not confidence in him anymore because this controversy occurred. And then you had different opinions, right? Where there's a lot of, experts or people at the top of media who would say, look, this isn't going to hurt Disney at all. He's fine. He should have just opposed this bill publicly and not tried to even cast a neutral stance, which is what he was sort of trying to do in the beginning. And there's other people who say, well, he could have done this in a way where he spoke out of both sides of his mouth, but that's usually what they do. And said, I do believe in protecting kids from, sexuality at a young age when they're not ready for it, but that's not what this is about. And I stand with blah, blah, blah. Right. I mean, so it's a colossal show. And what I'm most interested in, what I'm dancing around is, I wonder, and in my heart, I hope and want to see Disney get crushed. And I want to see new structures built. And I definitely think we're at a moment where more and more people are taking this seriously, but I don't know how far it all goes,
Yeah, well, I should say, I guess I hadn't even thought about, when I say we can win on this, I mean like, the bills themselves actually, and the laws themselves actually have support, and parents, when they see what's going on, generally seem to get behind politicians and policies that get this stuff out of schools. But yeah, I mean, to bring Disney down with just groundswell protest is another matter. I mean, Rufo seems to think that that's his next crusade, or at least he tweets, we are turning half of their customers against one another. As we are recording, the Daily Wire has just announced it's putting $100 million into kids' entertainment. So they're going to do their own kind of counteroffensive as well.
100 million, really?
$100 million, yeah. So, I mean, they continue to kill it, I think, in this dimension.
Yeah.
And as you say, Matt, like you guys at New Founding are doing a lot of this work as well to offer alternatives, stop buying from people that hate you, and so on and so forth. But no, I don't think that we can destroy Disney. And like you say, there's going to be a ton of inertia, like people like Disney IP in general, and it takes a while for that to expire. But the creation of a parallel economy that is sort of appeals to people who are just generally disgusted by this stuff and will support politicians who fight against it. That seems within reach to me.
Yeah, definitely the play is to, that's the whole point of sort of what we're doing at New Founding. And you have to provide an alternative, which even if in the beginning is not as good, people will gravitate towards because they know it's on their side. But you need to supply an alternative that's real. And it's not just a reaction to what they're doing. And as they get worse and worse, that makes the opportunity grows greater and greater for people to make this content. Imagine all the money that's been wasted on think tanks that could have gone to media content that actually persuades people. And by the way, that's not political commentary. That's more lifestyle type stuff. Or, children's stories have always been fraught a source of wisdom or a place for you to propagandize because you have the mind. So I think there's a lot that will happen on that front. What I'd like to see, though, is, and I feel that some of this is possible, enormous company, right? It's not going to go anytime soon. But I'd like to see some of that IP actually just become cringe, right? Mm-hmm. And I do think, for instance, something like Star Wars, this has happened. It was a cool thing to talk about nostalgia and watching those movies and whatever. And, I was a kid in the 80s, right? So, that was a cool thing to talk about. But then it became like really weird, and some people grew up and some people didn't. And now it's almost a symbol of, a sick culture where grown men are way too into these things and not into anything else that's serious. And therefore, it all of a sudden is not just recreational fun. This becomes a real problem, right?
Yeah.
And I do feel like a lot of these big brands, like Marvel as well, I think there's a bit of outwearing their welcome in terms of their freshness or their kind of like deep sexiness or cultural appeal. And I could see them not being able to produce anything new. I mean, that's already been the case. That's why they bought these things. But I could see some of this wearing out. And more, it's the best play will be to go foreign. I mean, there's a little bit of wish casting in what I just said, but there's something true about it too. And between that and then people building new things, hopefully as fast as possible, we might get somewhere. The new things have to be real. They have to make money, right? They have to be revenue generating entities that aren't just going against the other side. But between those two aspects, and those are the two fronts, right? And I do feel like they're cringing themselves out, and they're increasingly putting themselves right in opposition to millions of people. That's clearly happening. Question is, that alone is not enough. And we need, I love what Rufo's doing, because we need people to just say specific calls to action, like, it's time. You have to stop watching Disney. These people hate you, and they're over the top. This company is unsalvageable. Why would you do this? You need to just stop doing it. Like, that's a great message right now. I'm down. I'm down with it. I just like people should actually move to red states, in my opinion, if they all can. But here we are. It's another day in the fray. What's awesome about it, though, just to I need to let Seth get in here. What's awesome about it to me, the best part about it is solidifying, though, something that's been building for a long time. Woke Star Wars. These debates about Disney. It's all kind of broke open, and you see Rufo and there others, and I've been in contact with some people working on this. There's just a lot of momentum on the right to say, okay, we're going to draw the line, and we're actually going to go after Disney.
Well, look, I think it would be great if people on the right were to, vote with their wallets and, turn the TV off and all of that stuff. But it's funny because you hear the same thing on the left about Florida. Like, all these people are like, no gay person should vacation in Florida ever again. And I kind of feel like both of these boycotts or these calls will have pretty much the same kind of impact, which is maybe not zero, but not super significant.
Yeah.
I agree with you that, like, Disney, fortunately I missed having to take my children to Disneyland or World, although we did spend plenty of money on the on all the princess movies and all that stuff. But what I think would be great is if, and I see this happening, and it's it's sort of parallel, which is people becoming disenchanted, yes, with Disney, Hollywood, but at the same time becoming disenchanted with this parallel institution, which is the teachers union, which also exercises this kind of ideological / regulatory capture. Over the last few years, we've seen people getting really just turned off by their local, schools, public schools, and the teachers unions with the COVID stuff. But I think what DeSantis has done, my favorite thing about this whole, bill and the Don't Say Gay charade is these interviews with teachers who are basically saying, like, if you don't let me talk to my first grade class about gender, sexuality, and sexual preference, then I can't do my job. Like, you really get the sense that these people, they're like gender commissars. They went into teaching in order to discuss gender with little kids. Like the whole okay groomer thing, really, I mean, they get horrified by it and they find it like so insulting, but that's really what they're doing. They really, I mean, okay, maybe they're not trying to groom 7-year-olds to be like, sex partners with them necessarily, but they are certainly interested in warping their minds. Like someone was saying, how is this going to do anything but confuse little children, like talking to them about gender and sexuality and all of that, and gender fluidity? But that's exactly the point. It's the confusion is the lesson. They're trying to inculcate confusion into children. And, I saw something that some teacher in Texas insists that 24 of her 30 students are LGBTQ. These are like second graders or kindergartners.
Yeah.
It's really like this mass sickness, and somehow we've allowed these like lunatics to take over the teaching profession.
Yes.
So if people can kind of wake up to that, and wake up to Disney, I mean, that would be like revolutionary.
Hey, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention on this very topic, my colleague Alvin at New Founding, we've hatched this idea for a C4 that will grow out of New Founding, which is, if successful, he'll just run. And he's a guy who fought CRT, moved from California to Indiana to get out of the madness, and then fought critical race theory in Indiana. And he did a fantastic job there. And so he's been through it. Like, he understands what parents are going through and the challenges of, this kind of grassroots opposition. So, but he's going to do the gender stuff and the whole 9 yards. So he came up with this great idea for courage is a habit. And if you go right now, double check, but I'm pretty sure it's courageisahabit.org. You can download 10 questions every parent can ask to protect their kids. And these are the questions that you sign up, you get the 10 questions, and then there's an email kind of explaining, the rationale behind these questions that you can ask about what's going on at your school. And Courage is a Habit will educate parents. We're going to have educational modules on there, videos you can watch explaining what's going on. And what's going on, it's pretty dark. Like you're saying, Seth, I mean, these teachers, it's not just random. It's not like a bunch of, like, there's a group of woke teachers who went to education school and then are teaching. The system itself has adopted all of this stuff. So, the American Pediatric Association is going to oppose DeSantis's bill. The counselors, all the kind of accrediting or pseudo accrediting institutions when it comes to counselors in K through 12s, they've all already adopted all of this stuff. And the whole job of the counselor, is to start getting into the kids' sex lives and everything else, because that's all part of their identity, informing them. And then you have SEL, or social emotional learning, which is completely demonic. I mean, it's way worse than CRT. It's beyond critical race theory. And this is what Courage is a Habit, courageisahabit.org we'll talk about. But this is something Rufo has been talking about. I mean, the idea in a way is to just go in, discover the personality of the student, and then push them to be woke. And it, covers everything. So I think that what people need to realize is this is already baked into the system. And to get it out would require a hell of a lot. Like, you'd have to just get rid of the teachers' ed schools, or get rid of that credential entirely. I mean, you would have to take a flamethrower to a lot of the system if you really wanted to change this. That's why there's only hope in kind of red states where you can potentially start doing that. But in the meantime, I mean, I just think more and more people are going to pull their kids the hell out, and we might just have a lot more charter schools by default in states that will allow them to be sort of free and non-woke. That's what people are going to have to move to, even in the best case scenario, because there's just no way to change the system anytime soon.
Yeah, and to another point, I mean, I guess another fond hope I have is that essentially school is cringe and teachers are cringe, and listening to some like hyper earnest, like blue-haired teacher telling you about her gender identity is going to make like any normal child like giggle and just like mock her. I mean, in the same way that, like, I don't know, when I was in school, like having some teacher, I don't know, rant about patriotism or stuff like that just seemed like incredibly hokey and like nerdy.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely establishment now. Like,
right.
It's total. I mean, just in the same way that Star Trek and Marvel and Star Wars, which were all kind of, edgy. I mean, edgy is maybe going too far, but they were cool, nerdy content, and they had fan bases that loved to, that actually considered it a point of pride that they had seen every episode and they knew every like moment of every movie or whatever. And now that they have become these very obviously corporate behemoths just churning out schlock, like kind of reprocessed movie product for lumpen proletariat, like just this, funneling it down people's throats. It's totally lame to be like into these things. Like, I feel embarrassed saying that I like Star Trek, or I like, because what that means now is like, I don't know if you guys have seen Star Trek Discovery, which is the latest one, but it's basically like every lead is some sort of, perfectly curated and selected minority. And it is, I swear, the weepiest. It's like if you had to do a bad stereotype of what, a kind of woke Star Wars would be. It's just like every scene is like, when you shot your phaser at that alien, I felt, but I thought that you felt. So it's like, I mean, there's genuinely a way in which this does, it's impossible to enter into the mainstream and still be like cool and edgy as an outsider. I mean, Camille Paglia talks about this all the time, that like the radicals, the lefty radicals of the 60s failed to understand that they had become the establishment. So yeah, maybe you get some of that.
Spencer, is that the same show? Because I saw this clip where they're like, here comes the president of the world. Yeah. The president of planet Earth is emerging, and it's Stacey Abrams.
Yeah, and that's what I mean.
What's great about it is Stacey Abrams clearly did not see it as like camp.
Right.
Like, she honestly seemed to think that this was her appropriate role.
Oh yeah, and they did
like president of the world. They were doing
already
it like
been elected.
Straight.
She was elected a while ago. So.
She was elected.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. It was stolen from her by a white supremacist. But no, I mean, this is and the tone of the scene, which for my sins I did watch, is completely earnest. Like, it's totally and so yeah, like, when they take something that you love and they turn it into just like lame, sort of authoritarian cringe. Hopefully, like, people start to rebel a little bit, or kids at least. You see the same thing with the COVID stuff. It's like they can't tell you how damaged they feel by it, but they remember, right? Kids internalize all of this stuff, and then they grow up to hopefully like fight back against it. Anyway, we've now devolved into talking about Stacey Abrams on Discovery, a moment I was committed to erasing from my memory. So I think we need to move on.
It was like they took that picture of her with the cape as Superman woman.
Yeah. They did that right. That was on Time magazine.
And they just said, oh, well, we'll just make her president of the Earth, and everything about it. It just it's a perfect scene because everything wrong with that, and it's just makes you want to throw things.
Yeah, and there is no, there's no, people retreat. The counter, the black pill version of the white pill that we've all been sharing is that, like, people never learn, and they just constantly retreat to like the other corner of the IP that they think is untouched. So it's like, well, Discovery is kind of the woke Star Trek, but like we have Picard, Picard is this other kind of older fashioned tradition. And then of course, like this stuff does not stay in its box. Like, it just kind of spreads out. The latest Picard is like I'm totally telling on myself as like somebody that watches all this stuff, but, but my Disney Plus subscription is canceled. So there's
but don't you think don't you think that it's certainly wearing thin for artists? I mean, it's wearing thin for a lot of serious people who aren't just, propagandist shills or whatever you would call this,
Right.
zealots in this new religion. I mean, they can't stand this. Everyone is being forced into this woke box. Everyone knows what it looks like, and it's ridiculous, and it's stupid. It's moronic, and it makes for just really shitty stories. So it's certainly true. Like it's like an acid that's just burning down their kind of cultural credibility. And of course, but they built that up over a long period of time, and that's going to take a while. But I do feel like the thrill is gone over and over again, and all this stuff, and it makes it possible for this open lane, as everyone's been saying. And I guess the one thing that I'm really, we're really bullish on at New Founding is I was just at the first launch party for Return. Human Life in the Digital Age, published by the guy named James Polis, who
is that where he is today?
Had an aesthetic vision. Yeah, I mean, he's doing like podcasts and other things, but he had a vision for it, obviously an intellectual vision. And before even we founding, I was talking to Nate Fisher, who's my co-founder there, and Nate said, "Hey, someone should create a kind of tech publication that's kind of American mindish, or a little bit outside the box. It's not political, but is just looking at tech in a different way." And I thought that would draw together a community of people in technology who don't want to march to the woke drum and quietly are interested in other ideas. And that's the kind of content that I think exists. It's open field in every area, and it's not it's not the stuff that requires millions and millions of dollars. Movies and whatnot. It's more what you call lifestyle, where you're just letting people breathe and showing them things that they're interested in that won't be curated in the same way by the woke Borg. And we know what they'll talk about in every single magazine. But with Return.life, you got a community of people that are interested in technology, interested in human beings, harnessing it and living well. And that's exciting though, right? That's exciting. There's an slight element of dissidence in that, even when you start just showing what people are doing that's interesting or beautiful or good, that you're not allowed to see anywhere else. That's interesting, and that just showing people stuff that's desirable is what ultimately moves the dial. So if we can, the problem is we need consistent revenue flow, right, in some entities that can fund and draw the talent together. But I mean, I'll go back to the white pill. I mean, there's more talent available in media, tech, and finance than ever before for enterprises that really serve people, and I guess by default, we're sort of right-leaning now. So there's more talent available to the right when it comes to media right now, just because of the wokeness, than there ever has been.
I mean, well, like the profession of actor, as you say, much like the profession of public school teacher, is now purely the profession of of woke teaching, of woke cleric, right? I mean, I can't imagine going into it now unless you felt that was your cause. Otherwise it's like whatever creative spark, whatever genuine passion you have is going to be crushed out of you. There's not going to be any room for it. And people look at something like the Daily Wire or even like PragerU or what New Founding is doing, and sometimes they'll be like, well, it's cringe, it's cringe conservative content. It's just it's sort of the uncool kids, like, gathering in the cafeteria. But it's like, at a certain point, how much more cringe is it than like Star Trek Discovery, right? How much more cringe is it than Stacey Abrams, president of Planet Earth? So there does have to be a tipping point, and we hope to contribute to it.
Yeah. So let me say something here for people. One thing we've been talking about way behind the scenes at the American Mind. So I'll be chair of the publishing committee with some friends of the American Mind to help support it and help it grow. And I still teach, but just much less in the fellowship programs. And I'm a co-conspirator behind the scenes, but pretty much all my time is now devoted to New Founding and building this commercial cultural movement. But one thing that I think is needed, and it would be different than PragerU, is what I call based PragerU. And I've been talking to a few luminaries and names you'd recognize about doing this, where we would take issues that we think like PragerU may not get right, or the old video from PragerU too long ago wouldn't work. And look, I love Prager, and I love PragerU. So, but we take things where it's a little bit more of an American mind style topic, and then we would make a series of videos with Claremont's network of experts on those topics. So the idea would be base PragerU. So yeah, and I would like to go directly at the things that are sort of awkward or confusing. So for instance, we used to say this about immigration, but now we say something very different. Trump says there's something very different. Why is that? Why have people's minds changed on immigration? It's like, well, first they were sold this, and here's what's going on with that, right? I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that could be done that no one else is doing, that American Mind would actually be, and Claremont would be a appropriate kind of, presents this material and helps solicit the networks and the ideas for it. And that content, I think that would fit. Then you guys fit with the American Mind. I mean, if you agree with me, you should contact me and talk about funding it. We certainly could make that in conjunction with other people. But that's the kind of content, like, the fact I'm saying this, right? We're having this discussion. We're thinking about what's the media that's needed, shows that we're getting somewhere.
And they
you guys like that idea?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like the more of this stuff you get in the space, the better. And I think that you're absolutely right that like there's so many people out there with just like sort of let a thousand flowers bloom. Like why is this talent going to waste? Well, because the sort of traditional modes of expressing it have been completely captured. And so and people still think that they can somehow break into the industry as it once was, and that industry is simply gone.
It's like the Academy. It's like, it's sorry, but it's over. Like it's gone. It's the whole system is rotten. Like some people can hold out, maybe some people can still get in, but basically you got to go to the alternative ecosystem in the Academy or it's over. And with media, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same way. And that transition process might be awesome if we disrupt some of these large companies and create some things that scale up fast.
So folks go to newfounding.com, yes, to contact you, Matt, about this stuff. Is that the website?
Yeah, they could definitely find a way to contact me there.
Okay. So you should do that. In the meantime, we should talk about one other thing, at least, which is this California bill. I don't know if folks will have seen this or not. It's AB 2223. And just to really, there ought to be a German word for being shocked but not surprised, because it fits the bill here. They've been talking about, legislating abortion into existence or into legality in blue states. This is not exactly that. It's not the so-called post-Dobbs law where they anticipate the repeal of Roe by mandating legal abortion. But it's in some ways even more horrifying. The key point here, I'll just read the passage. Notwithstanding any other law, a person shall not be subject to civil or criminal liability or penalty or otherwise deprived of their rights based on their actions or omissions with respect to their pregnancy or actual potential or alleged pregnancy outcome, including miscarriage, stillbirth, or abortion, or perinatal death. Now, perinatal, that's 28 days after the birth. That's the period after the baby is out of the womb. And so effectively, this is a bill that legalizes just letting your baby die by neglect, or it's so broadly written that you could interpret it to just like actively killing. Actions taken, right, based on actions or omissions. So this is really, when people said, when Ralph Northam made this so-called supposed gaffe about this, and people said like this is what they want, they always laughed at us like, oh no, this is just in very extreme cases or a threat to the health of the mother. But it's tough, I realize, but like there's no built-in stoppage here. This is it's amazing to me that this is genuinely on the books. I feel as if like if we're going to mount our own Don't Say Gay campaign, it should be like, this is just the kill infants law. Like California wants you to be able to kill your infant like outside the womb. I'm so floored by it that I don't know what else to say other than that, and pass it over to you guys.
Well, I thought this was. I first heard about this. There was a similar bill with similar language that came up in Maryland a few weeks ago, which is where I first heard about this. And I'm not sure what happened to it there. I mean, there's a few things that strike me. One, I'm always interested in how this kind of legislation always occurs at the same time in multiple states. Like, it happens on the right too. So it's obviously driven by nonprofits, foundations, somebody who is out there, contacting legislators and telling them what the next cool thing is. And also the way that it's written. So, it's bizarrely expansive. It's obscure because, like, who knows what perinatal means?
Well, one wonders whether the author of the bill knows what perinatal means, but maybe that's a separate question.
Well, I'm sure the whoever the real author is, like some lawyer in, I don't know, a NARAL office or wherever, surely knows what it means. Whether the sponsor of the legislation knows what it means is something else. But it's interesting because they write it in such a way that to leave them plausible deniability. So they can say, oh, great, the GOP says that that abortion is about murdering babies. Well, that's what they always say. This has nothing to do with that. This is only, ... Yeah, I just thought this was, like, really interesting. I mean, for the same reasons that you brought up, just that it's hard to believe that this is what they're doing now and how they're trying to sneak it in. And I have no doubt. I mean, I've seen a few things, people saying that's not what the bill says. That's not what this is at all. But clearly it is, if you want to take it by the actual language of the bill. I mean, the thing is, the Constitution has protections for all persons. So I don't see how you could pass a state law allowing, I mean, nobody's going to deny that life begins at birth. I mean, that even that goes a little, that would be a bit extreme even for, like, the hard left or, like, abortion, radicals. So with life beginning at birth, I don't understand how they could possibly hope to, or I guess, I mean, that's the whole thing about viability. It's like, who's viable? Who among us is really viable by ourselves?
Right, without food, it's like I'm not viable for very long. Well, and there's also, I mean, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the writings of this fellow Peter Singer, I guess Australian moral philosopher, big
I spent an afternoon with him one day.
Did you really?
Yeah, years ago.
I'm preaching to the choir. Okay, so did you ask him about whether it's more moral to kill a baby than a child? Or than a puppy, rather?
No, I didn't. I mean, I think I can imagine what his answer would be. I don't think he sees much of a. No, I don't think he actually sees much of a difference. The main thing I remember is I asked him, like, who his favorite, like, philosophers were of, like, say, the 20th century. And he just seemed to think that nobody was quite up to his standard.
Well, he's right about, I mean, his standard, I don't know, but he's not wrong about the, like, inadequacy of 21st century philosophers. I mean, there is a kind of, hyper rationalist, and I use that term disparagingly to mean, like, so rationalist that you've ceased to become human, like, well, if you really think about it, it's like a clump of cells becomes a bigger clump of cells, and then you're just another clump of cells, like, outside. It's not the mother, the mother doesn't incur any responsibility to feed this baby. And no, I don't know. I kind of think that life begins when we say it does, has always been the underlying logic of the really pro-abortion crowd.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad, right? Because it's so horrific, but it has been baked in from the beginning. You can't, ultimately, you're defining an arbitrary line in there, because it's arbitrary. It's like, what is the difference if you think you can kill the baby, 5 seconds, within a 5 second difference, as a when it's fully out. There's that great exchange famous from years ago in Congress where you have someone asking about this, right? As if the head's out, then is it alive?
Right.
When the full baby comes out, then is it alive? And I mean, you've seen evidence of them moving this way, and this is why what's happening in America is a crazy thing to live through right now. I mean, they're just pushing on every front because they've won, and they're not going to stop until they're stopped. And the next step is absolutely to say, yes, you can just leave the baby outside in the cold and let it die, bring it to the woods, and and walk away and get back to the ancient Greek and Roman way. And that's where we're going. We're going to a kind of paganism, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's not quite the right word, but it's like we said about Epstein. I mean, the most natural thing in the world is for society to revert into wealthy sex cults and little shrines to minor deities that weird people get around. And I mean, this has been going on for a long time. It's just going to become more evident that we're not different. We haven't progressed. We're regressing. Civilization is actually, falling apart. American civilization needs to be refounded. The American and I would just ask for an American way of life to be renewed. Something that's recognizably, distinctly American to be renewed, because it's like we can't keep up or fathom how bad things are now. But to Seth's point with the bill, I mean, it is, it's hard to imagine right now they can get away with it, but it's California, so I would imagine they're proud of leading the way. And you notice some of the press on this. I hadn't seen too much about it, but some of the press on this is there's this narrative now in California. It's just explicit that they're going to balance out the rest of the union because of Texas's abortion law, right? Like, and so maybe this is their way of balancing out. Like, oh yeah, well, we're going to let you kill babies when they're out of the womb.
Yeah, kill a living infant to make up for all the many infants that are not killed in the womb. No, I mean, it's so gruesome that you almost have to take a certain black humor approach to it. But I do think that there is a potential accelerationist argument here, which is that at a certain point, your point about pagan societies, Matt, is well taken, because it means that it's not like we're relying here on the inherent, moral law written on everybody's hearts to teach us that killing inconvenient babies is bad. Like, plenty of societies have done that throughout history. And
yes,
when you take away the training and the acculturation and the habituation, then you're just Sparta, a highly, even a highly civilized society in many ways, right? It's not
It's just, and it's something that's been around for a while. I think one of the important things to realize, and I think it's happening to me, it's happening to everybody, is just the reality of, where we're at and what we're doing. So I think to gather our heads around why this is happening, it really is true that what is the difference? We already allow this when the baby's in the womb, fairly far along in many places, more than most of the world. We have no argument really about what we're doing and why. Once you say, past viability is fine too. There's no guardrail here. So what is the difference? They can't answer that, and they don't care to. And the answer has nothing to do with science. This is the fake thing about the last century was that, it turned secular and it was science, but there was some science going on, but science can't replace the kind of moral law that you're talking about. And if you're going to get rid of that, then what is the difference? It's all slippery slopes, because there's no obstacle to prevent it, right? And
sure,
there's nothing, there's no there. So in theory, there's the only thing is some kind of instinct people have of, thank God, revulsion at seeing a child, a baby die, but babies are already dying. And
right. I mean, from this, it follows that the only antidote to this is not people's just baseline instinct, because, as you say, they don't really have a baseline instinct against killing babies or inconvenient people, but rather the sort of vestigial Judeo-Christian commitment to the imago Dei, right? I mean, it's been pointed out now sort of exhaustively that even woke culture is a sort of residue of these convictions, these emotional convictions that we inherit from thousands of years of Judeo-Christian teaching, right? Just, that persons are made in the image of God. And there's that chilling Nietzsche quote, I think it's in Daybreak, where he says, like, the fact that you believe something is wrong might just be because you were always taught that way and you have never examined it. And many of our own moral convictions, good moral convictions, like that you don't kill innocents, for example, even if it's convenient to you, like those convictions come precisely from our scriptural heritage. And people who don't even believe in scripture, nevertheless, are acculturated and raised and still breathe in out of the atmosphere these moral aversions like, don't kill a baby that's outside the womb. And the question is whether Nietzsche was right that eventually, once you jettison the taproot of that ethical feeling, you also jettison the ethics, or whether the feeling and the revulsion sort of reasserts itself and we start to wonder, like, well, why don't I think that you can kill a baby and sort of return, as it were?
Well, I don't know. I mean, doesn't the question come down to, well, I'm not a biologist, so how am I supposed to know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
right.
I think, the essential response now.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. In all seriousness, you just say, well, I don't know the science. It's the divine mysteries of science are a mystery to me. Yeah. We just must believe what we're told it is. No one's behind the curtain. I mean, this whole that whole thing is it moves in one direction. The current moves in one direction, and that is to death and to just what's harmful to human beings. And what I think the right needs to do more of rhetorically is start grabbing their line about people are dying, right? Because they love this all the time. It's like all the woke people are dying. Like Black people are dying because they're being, shot down by the thousands and millions by white supremacists, and trans
kids are dying because you won't let the teacher talk to them about the genderbread man.
Yes. Yes.
People will die.
Here's the sad truth is there are people dying in America. There are many millions of people affected by drug abuse right now, drug addiction. Fentanyl has killed so many people. There are people dying the deaths of despair, right? I mean, from drug use, from suicide. These people really are dying. Americans really are dying, and those deaths have gone up. They've skyrocketed. And no one gives a damn for them, the actual people who are dying, and people who are dying in droves, right? Which is Americans of all kinds. And then when you look at every one of these issues, of course, it's not intentional, but in terms of abortion, like, yeah, people are dying, babies are dying. If you think post viability, at least, babies are dying, millions of them. You think that doesn't have an effect on a culture? You're nuts. And it moves in one direction. And there are people dying. And the right should talk about that. They should talk about people dying. And they're so quick to jump to it because they're just, it's a cheap trick to go right to the worst possible scenario. So there's no reason why we couldn't grab onto that,
Absolutely. And, I really like your point before that no other country in the world has such relaxed standards on abortion as the United States. Even countries that, they get very excited that, I don't know, Argentina or Mexico liberalized it. Countries in Europe that have liberal abortion laws, they permit it up to, like, say, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 9. I mean, and, you have to get, like, a doctor's note saying that or two doctors to say that, yes, you would be, very traumatized by it, whatever. There's no other country in the world that permits it essentially just, on demand, as we put it.
Well, I mean, we are, I think, the world's leaders in woke madness. I mean, there are other countries that have liberalized more quickly than us because they're population and their general sort of attitude is more susceptible to it. But as an actual, like, state ideology, I think that we are still, because we are the country in the West whose philosophy is most urgent to the world and where people come to actually adjudicate the big theological and philosophical questions of the century. I actually think that we are leaders in this sort of weird transhumanist materialist nihilism. Like the people aren't, but the oligarchs are totally at the vanguard of this. And so it actually stands to reason in a certain sense that, like, although we have some of the most conservative people in the world, we have some of the truly furthest gone leaders when it comes to just, denial of nature and of personhood and of the divine. Yeah. So that's something to be proud of, American exceptionalism.
We have to, yeah. And so I wonder about this too. I mean, I wonder if there'd be someone on the left and not the right has actually mapped out the population, which now would be possible to do, right, by your very name, politically, right? Like, where does everyone live? Who's from which side? Because they could easily do that with big data now. And you do wonder what the numbers are. And I mean, look, the deeper problem here is that these sides, these are irreconcilable differences. So one side has to win in order for us not to fall apart in some way where things get even more gnarly, as they used to say in California, than they are now, which is what's happening. And so this is why, right, the new media, new tech, and new finance absolutely needed, because otherwise you just won't have a cohesive mass or a way to unite the people that you're talking about that still represent something that's recognizably connected to those American virtues, values, ways of life. But there's no beating around the bush, right? I mean, it really is that deep. And when you're talking about whether or not killing a baby is murder or what a man or woman is, I mean, that's the point we're at. So that means everyone out there, I'm going to start talking about this this year to everybody I meet nationally. You're going to have to act. You're going to have to change what you're doing, especially if you're sitting there and like, I'm a Christian, I'm a conservative Christian, I'm worried about what's going on. Of course, Matt, I know abortion's bad. It's like, okay, well, it's time to reevaluate your life and look around and say, what am I doing in a place like California that's moving in this direction with very little hope of changing a damn thing there? And the only way you can change a damn thing there is by going to a place where you can have some influence in a red state, where you start building a political structure that will just defend you. Just think about that, right? I mean, some of my friends, some people I know where, well, I don't want to vote for Trump because, he's a bad man. It's like, you're going to have to vote for Assad soon, because you'll have a choice of dictators and some of them will protect you and some of them won't. That's where it leads, right? So we have to build up a new culture. And I think it's more than just people who are faithful Christians. I think there's a lot of people who still value excellence, who still value, excellence in human affairs, competence, and who want to be part of communities that aren't afflicted by this zealotry and this evil religion. So that people are going to have to act in various ways and reevaluate completely how they live their lives in order to build up what's needed. Because that's the only way out that I see. I don't see, go woke, go broke. Are you kidding me? Like, Disney is doing just fine. And they'll figure it out. They'll play the game, and then they'll push, and then they'll come back a little bit to save themselves. But it's not going to go away. It's not just going to go away. So if you are someone who has some kind of desire, or you think you have some duty to the common good as a citizen, as a person of faith, you're not going to be able to just live your life. I mean, they're coming for you. They're coming for your children. They're not going to stop pushing. And so you're going to have to take action. And we can talk about, what that action might entail and what we might need to do. But everyone has to get out of the old mindset.
Yeah, well said. We've just published a piece by this woman, Megan Basham, who writes for the Daily Wire as well. And I think she's really excellent. And in the piece, she points out that something like, when you ask people, should men play on women's sports teams if they identify as as women, something like 27% of men say yes and 43% of women. And so she was saying, look, like, women are kind of leading the way on this, and men are capitulating to them. But my feeling is like neither of those is a majority. Like, when you start thinking about the map of the country and who's conservative and what people's instincts are, like there's a lot of sensible people out there. We just got to organize, which is what Matt is talking about, right? Is actually putting your money where your mouth is and getting serious about like not just being able to kind of while away the hours while Rome burns. So one more time, it's newfounding.com to get involved with this. That is all the time we have for this week. So thank you for listening to The Roundtable. If you want to learn more, visit our websites at americanmind.org, claremont.org, claremontreviewofbooks.com, and our DC-based Center for the American Way of Life at dc.claremont.org. You can donate to support the show at claremont.org/donate. And don't forget to rate, review, share, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, as always, for listening. Talk to you next week.